Hello and welcome to the next webinar series. I am Michelle O'Connor. I own O'Connor Insurance in Charlotte, North Carolina, where it is thankfully quite beautiful and sunny today. Last week we were faced with a monsoon of rain, so I'm happy to see the sunshine today and some warmer temperatures headed our way. So I kicked off a new series for the month of June. It's all around selling your agency. There are a number of reasons for this topic. One is that every single day, it seems like I get either an email or a letter or a postcard from a broker or an investor who's looking to purchase my agency. With that being said, there's not a lot of information on the computer and on the web about how to sell your agency. So I have I have not sold one. I have helped friends sell one, and I have purchased an agency. And I thought that it would be a good way to, again, help educate my agency friends to share this information with you. So I'm excited to kick off this new series, and I look forward to sharing some great stuff with you today. So a couple housekeeping things before we get started. The first one is there is a chat box. If you have anything that you would like to ask, you can put a question in that chat box at any time. It only comes to me. It does not broadcast to everyone. So every Zoom's set up a little bit differently. I just wanted to assure you that the questions only come to me. I'm the only one that can see them. So don't hesitate to throw anything in there. After the presentation, I do record it. So after it, sometime this afternoon or tomorrow, you will receive an email from me with a link to the recording. I'm also very excited to announce that I have a web page on our O'Connor Insurance website that I'll be sharing with you that has all the previous webinars recorded. And so you watch them at your leisure. You can share them with staff members. You can do anything that you need that will help you out. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that that is coming too. I'm excited to have a holding tank for these. And I think that they'll be useful for us in the future. So I'm going to kick off. The webinar itself will last about 25 to 30 minutes. And then if you have any questions after that, like I said, I'm happy to answer them. Everyone is currently muted, so you don't have to worry about that either. And for those of you that have joined me before, you know that I love to share a poll. So I'm going to kick off with a poll. If you will just take a quick second to let me know where you are in your selling strategy. Are you planning on sailing off into the sunset tomorrow if you could find the right buyer? Can you not get the for sale sign in the yard fast enough? Are you looking at a 3 to 5 year plan? Or maybe you're in my boat and you're 10 years plus, but it's something that you still want to think about. Okay, so it looks like everybody is about done with the poll. I'm going to end it in a few seconds. I'll give you a quick countdown if anybody wants to add. 3, 2, 1. Excellent. Super. Thank you so much for sharing that information with me. That gives me a great idea of where everyone is at. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so we can kick off the presentation. And let's see, here we go. So the first thing I want you to do is close your eyes and imagine for a moment that you have sailed off into the proverbial sunset. For some of you, that means you're retired. And for some of you, that might mean you are starting a new phase, maybe even a new career. What does that phase look like? Are you enjoying your favorite hobby, golfing, fishing, boating, or maybe you're spending more time with your children and your grandchildren? Maybe you're in your RV and you're headed west on the open highway. Whatever that looks like for you, just take a few minutes to think about it. How does it feel? How do you feel? You don't have to worry about receiving that 7 a.m. call that your top employee is going to be out sick for the week. You no longer have to worry about upgrading your agency management system, and you don't have to think about phone systems any longer. Kind of a nice feeling to have some of those responsibilities lifted off of our shoulders, huh? I know it is for me. So painting the picture of what you want your life to look like after you sell is the first and most step in this process. For some of you, this vision could be reality sooner versus later. No matter if you're planning on selling tomorrow or in 10 years, the time to start planning is actually now. And just as an example, I plan on working 20 more years. I'm sure most of you know my age or can at least guess it, but I got 20 more years to go. With that being said, believe it or not, I have a strategy right now. I know what my future looks like, and I know what I want to sell for. Maybe you think I'm an overplanner, and that's okay. For those of you that know me personally, you know that's probably true. But for the rest of you, you also know that having a vision of what I want to do helps me in guiding our agency every single day. So let's kick off into the 3 questions you have to answer before you sell your agency. I already tipped you off. The first one is planning. After that, you need to determine a valuation, and then you need to think about what the transition looks like. So we're going to dive into each of the 3 of these. So first things first, in the planning category, you have to get your house in order. I like the analogy if you were getting your home ready to sell. It's the same thing as getting your agency ready to sell. So if you think about it for a second, if I'm getting ready to sell my home, I'm going to paint the trim. I'm going to get out that honey-do list for my husband of all those leaky faucets and outlet that needed changed or anything else that was on that little list of to-dos. And we're going to get all those things done inside. Give it a great deep clean, make it sparkling clean. That's the same thing that you need to do in your agency. You need to get all of your reports in order. This is the most important thing you can do, is have access to all of this information. So some of the reports a potential buyer will need and want to properly evaluate your business are your commission reports from your carriers, your carrier production reports, the financials that you pull from whatever system you use for those, and the production reports from your agency management system. The cleaner your records and your reports are, the more likely it is for a potential buyer to see the success of all of your hard work. Without those reports, they're kind of shooting in the dark, I should say, without a way of really being able to justify the valuation. So a simple strategy that I use for reports is I have an annual folder, and in there are all my production reports. So you can pull the monthly, quarterly, but if you do nothing at all, definitely do end of year reports. So right now you can go back and recreate this for 2019. Inside there, you want to put, you want to put a list of all these things in there, but you also want to come up with the actual list. So what reports do you want to have in there? Make a quick list of those. That way you can check them off as you go and you know you don't miss any. That's a strategy I employed a couple of years ago because I kept going back to look for reports that were missing in my production folders. So I didn't want that to happen anymore. So I created a list and I literally check it off every month when I run my reports, when I put my P&L in there to make sure I have everything that I want in there. So I would implore you to do the same. That way you can make sure you have all your 2019 records, and then you can go ahead and do first quarter 2020 now. And then moving out throughout the year, you'll have a list of everything that you want to make sure you gather for the rest of the year. It'll make the process really simple. Okay, so next, you will want to take a deep dive into those numbers. When was the last time you evaluated those numbers? Most agents I know have a number or 2 that they use to judge their agency. For some, it's how many policies they have in force. For others, they live and die on how much premium they've written. Some others still just look at loss ratios. As long as they're profitable, they keep chugging along. But a potential buyer is going to want to look at all those things. And the better your agency looks from each one of those angles, the more success you will show in all the hard work you've put in. So here's some highlights. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff that you can evaluate, but here's some highlights. Let's talk about that policies in force. Are your policies in force, is it growing? Is it stagnant? What does that look like? How about your commission income? Is it growing or is it lagging behind? Are you profitable? What does your profit margin actually look like? Is it increasing or is it shrinking? And last but not least, those loss ratios that I mentioned are of course very important. So what do each of your loss ratios look like, especially for the top 5 carriers where your main premium volume is? When you're evaluating, if you see any negatives in there, make some notes. You might even want to just create a Word document that's labeled notes that you put that information in there. If you had a shock loss in 2019, take 2 seconds and just jot those notes down. So you remember in a year or 2 or 5 what it is that happened that year. Otherwise, you'll think to yourself, I know something happened, but what was it? And then you'll have to dig back through all your things looking for what that was that happened. Same thing if you see any negative trends. So if there's negative policy enforced trends, maybe one of your carriers made the decision that you no longer write an umbrella application separately. So now those are all being put on the home, and that eliminated a great deal of your cross-selling. Something like that, just go ahead and put a note in there because it provides a really great explanation. On the flip side, if there's really good positive trends, it'd be a great idea to put some notes in there as well. Maybe you hired a new producer, maybe you employed a new sales strategy that worked really well. Put those notes in there too, so that you have all of that detail. The other thing I would detail in there is if you have any 1, 2, 3 very large accounts that have a large percentage of the commission or the premium volume, that was those 2 words combined, you want to make a note about that too. We had a very large account that we wrote in 2018 that has been shrinking. So by no fault of our own, we have lost some commission dollars out of that because his business is shrinking. And it was intentional. He told us he was going to scale it back, and he's been doing that. So it made good sense for him. However, when you look at our stuff, it kind of gives you a little bit of a heart failure because that amount of commission is missing. For me, I had always looked at it as bonus money, so it was no sweat for me, but it does impact our financials, and I have to remember that so I don't panic when I look at them. So if you put that little note in your Word doc, then when you go back to tell your agency's story, you'll have that information, and you can detail it. So next, let's talk about how your house looks like from the outside in. So if you were selling your home, you would put a great big beautiful pot of flowers out front. You would make sure the grass was trim and the bushes looked neat, and you'd refresh your bark or your pine straw. You want to make sure your agency looks immaculate from the outside in to attract a potential buyer that you're looking for. Same as the analogy with our house. So when we start talking about how your house looks like from the outside in, we want to look at your financials again. So I'm going to tell you to look through them carefully and cut unnecessary expenses. If you give me your P&L and I see in there, or I'm not able to see in there, that you have cell phones for your family, perhaps a car for your spouse, anything like that that you may be paying out of your business account, which no judgment from me by any stretch of anyone's imagination, but if you've got those things in there, you either want to line item them out separately and make it clean, or make a note of what it is that's in there so that when you talk to a potential buyer or you hand them your P&L, you can say, oh, by the way, these are owner's expenses that you will not have when I'm no longer operating the agency. Certainly that is going to make your financials much more impressive. In an ideal world, you'd go ahead and cut those things out, but I know that's not perfect for everyone. Something you might want to run by your accountant, however. You also want your financial statements to be very clean and very easy to read. Recently, I've had the opportunity to evaluate a few different agencies, and in looking at them, some owners really do a great job with this, and boy, did it make a difference in just understanding what's going on in the day-to-day cash flow. So it certainly helps in being able to say, yes, I can see that's going to work for me and my agency, or, oh gosh, I have no clue what's going on. I don't even get how it is that they're paying their people. They're not making any money. So if you have them clean and neat and organized, you won't have to worry about that. So your carrier reports are an excellent way to support what your financials say. So obviously, if you have commission records and you have production records, your financials should support those commission records. I would also suggest that if you have the majority of your business or a very large amount with one carrier, that you have all of the carrier reports that you would need to show your growth, to show your loss ratios, and to show your policies in force, any other substantial numbers that they track, easily accessible for the buyer, because that would be very important. Let's talk about those agency management system reports for a minute. This one's always a little bit elusive, right? Because as we all know, garbage in, garbage out with that. So if you are running your management production reports and you see something that looks funky on there, now is the time to get with your system provider and say, why is that there and how do we fix it? So that those reports will also support your financials and what you're saying. If you've been growing in your new business, you should be able to see that in the production reports, and you should be able to produce those reports and provide them to a potential buyer. Again, you're painting a picture, and you want that picture to show all of the highlights of how wonderful your agency is. And that's what a potential buyer wants to evaluate. If you have any doubt about those agency management reports, now is a great time to take a few days and get those cleaned up so that when you're putting data in them moving forward, that you've got good stuff in there. This is a super big pet peeve of mine because it seems like no matter how hard I try, garbage ends up in my management system, and it just drives me crazy. So I'm constantly evaluating my reports. Now I even have systems that I use that after I run the report, I know boxes I need to look at to make sure there's data in them and that it's clean. If anything looks funky, I send it right back to my staff to have it fixed. So that way, every month to month, our reports are clean. So at the end of the year, our reports are clean. So I even check them quarterly as well. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it to make sure that the things I'm getting out of there are really painting a picture of what's going on in my agency. So when your planning's all done, you should be able to articulate your time frame for selling and kind of have the process for what you want your agency to look like and what you want to stand out. All those little to-do projects cleaned up a little bit so that everything looks great when you put the for sale sign in the front yard. Potential buyers are all going to look at the things just a little bit differently because things will be important to different buyers. Certain things will be important to different buyers. You can't control what it is that they're looking for, but you can certainly control making your house look amazing to anyone that looks at it. And that's the most important takeaway. So after you've done all your planning, we are going to move on to the valuation. And once again, valuation means something different to everyone. I know that's probably not what you want to hear. Usually when I'm looking for an answer when it comes to valuation of my agency, I want a hard and fast number. I want to go to a source and I want them to tell me what it's worth. And I want to know if I put a for sale sign out, somebody's going to buy it for that amount and I'm good. But that's really not how it works. Every buyer I've ever met looks, again, at stuff a little bit differently. So that means that I'm going to value your agency different than 3 other buyers may value it. I know that's a little bit confusing, but back to that planning, if you make everything look its very best, you're going to draw out the best buyer that's the best fit for you because the things that they find important, your agency will shine. So it'll all work out. In reality, I believe that agency valuation, your agency's really worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it at the end of the day. And I think that fluctuates depending on what's going on. And I think that like I said, every buyer is looking for something a little bit differently. So what can you do when it comes to valuation? So if you're looking for a firm number or you want a good, accurate number, you can hire someone to do it. Now, I've been told that if your commission is under $1 million, that hiring a consulting firm to do a valuation is really an unnecessary expense. And I agree with that statement. I think for smaller shops that it is an unnecessary expense. It's a lot of money to have someone come in and do something like that. But perhaps you're going to perpetuate to a family member and you really want to make sure that the number you come up with is fair to everybody. Maybe the valuation is the way to go. Maybe you do pull somebody in from the outside. Obviously, if you decide not to do it that way, then you're going to have to determine the value yourself. So I know that you probably want that, like I said, that, it's 2 times the agency revenue. That's what agencies are worth. That's what the going rate is right now. I've also been told by a broker outside of our industry that I had a great talk with that you can also do it on a factor of EBITDA. So that's a little more confusing. And if your financial numbers aren't real clean, that might not be a great accurate number. For me personally, I believe that it lies in the middle somewhere. I think doing a valuation based on revenue and a valuation based on EBITDA Pulling them together, that's probably going to give you somewhere in the ballpark of what the agency's actually valued at. So just to give you a couple examples, one of the things that I did, and there's a lot of creativity when it comes to valuation, but I purchased an agency a few years back. And when I did that, I took all of the financial data and I reviewed it, and I paid different amounts for different carriers because that's what it was worth to me. So I had it on a spreadsheet. The seller didn't even end up knowing what I valued each of the carriers at, because in the end, I came up with the total and I went back and said, I'm willing to pay X to you. And that number met their threshold. They were good, and that's how we made our deal. So the interesting part about that is that there's a lot of factors that come into play when I'm looking at something like that. And for every buyer, there's going to be. Another agency I looked at buying, I couldn't make the numbers work. Him and I just couldn't come to an agreement. One of the problems with it was that when we merged our books together for one of our carriers, I was very much in danger of losing the profit sharing money. So because of that, I couldn't pay any more on the commission income. So another agency friend of mine ended up buying it and was kind enough to call me and tell me how the deal worked out for his agency, which was fascinating to me because when he merged the book of business with his, he stood to make a ton in the profit sharing. So he was willing to pay more for it. So that's just an interesting example of the creativity that can go on behind the scenes with evaluation, so that if you find the right buyer and you match them up with your agency, you can really stand to gain top dollar from it, and everyone gains top dollar from it. So it makes it work out really well. The other thing that I think is interesting too when it comes to valuation, if you're more than 5 years away from selling, you can back into your growth if you know what you want to sell for. So I mentioned that I'm an over planner. I actually have a spreadsheet 20 years out. And again, for those of you that know me, this is no surprise, but I have a 20-year Excel spreadsheet that tells me at the end of that 20 years, if I grow by X every year and my commission income is X, I can sell for X. I know what that number is right now. Now, at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of factors 20 years from now that we won't have even thought of, whether or not I can sell for 2 times or 12 times the EBITDA or whatever. But I know where I want my commission income to be to make sure that we have the money that we want to sail off into our RV across 40, hit the Grand Canyon, right? I know where that number is, and that's why. So if you have a little bit more time and you look into the future in that way to forecast, you can back into what your growth has to be every year in order to get to that number. That way there's no surprises for you, and it really helps with growth planning and keeping you on track. Okay, so we have planned, we've talked about valuation, and now let's talk about the transition. So I know that you all hear this from your agency friends just like I do, but most agents I know say they're going to die at their desks. They're never retiring. They're coming in every day. They're going to their desk whether they have work to do or not, and they're going to sit there because the agency is everything to them, and they don't want to sit at home and stare at their spouse. I get that. Well, it might seem like a good sales strategy. I hate to tell you, but I'm definitely going to debunk the myth that you should work until you die at your desk. There are so many other awesome ways that you can transition your agency. Rather than dying at your desk, let's talk about selling on your terms. So what does that look like? Well, that can look like a variety of really cool things. The worst thing about, let's talk about dying at your desk for a minute. Let's suppose that that happens. And if you haven't planned and you unexpectedly passed away, this could be a position that your family could be in. So not only is your family under a tremendous amount of stress, but your employees are as well because they've just lost a beloved person and coworker in their life. So your family, who's not trained in selling your agency and probably doesn't know it inside and out like you do, is going to have to start looking for a buyer while they're under a tremendous amount of stress and grieving still. When they do that, the first buyer that comes along that offers them cash, they're probably going to accept it. And without knowing what you know about your agency, they're going to accept much less than you probably could have gotten for your agency. So that's the first problem with it. The other problem is that as soon as customers start to hear that someone has passed away, if someone isn't coming right in and stepping in and saying, hey, we have a plan, don't panic, we're here for you, they may start leaving. So you're going to shed customers. And so then a potential buyer comes along, they offer a quick sale, boom, your family takes it and not nearly got what they should have from the agency. And I do not want that to happen to you. So I want you to know that transitions can mean a lot of different things. There are so many cool and creative ways that you can transition out of the business. Maybe you just absolutely love selling life insurance. That's all you want to do. So maybe you sell your agency and agree to stay on board as the life producer. I don't know many agency owners who would say no to that. I know I wouldn't. Or maybe you just have a handful of accounts that you would like to continue to service and call on and take golfing. Then that's what you do, and you make an agreement to do that. Maybe you're 5 to 10 years out, but you do not like the stress of managing the people and the day-to-day and all that good stuff. So maybe you start to make an agreement right now where you phase out over time and you phase out some of your management responsibilities. And again, pick the thing you like the most in your office. After all, you've worked all these years. You deserve to pick what you like to do and go do it. It's a myth that you have to do everything, all the grunt work. You can have a partner that can help you with that. And it also might ease the stress, but it will definitely ease you into the transition and your clients while still getting you top dollar, which at the end of the day is the most important part. The other things that are interesting about transition and valuation that I'm going to throw out there, valuation, I forgot to mention this when we were on that topic, and I don't want to forget. So I just want to say a few quick words about it. One of the other factors of valuation is if you're willing to hold the note on the agency sale, then you can also gain interest from it. So all of those creative factors that come into play are how you'll sail off into the sunset or stop by the office on occasion on your terms when you'd like to. All those factors come into play, and they also come into play in the transition portion. What does it look like for you? What do you want to do? What's important to you? Once you've got those things nailed down, then you can go looking for a buyer because it's already clear in your head. This is how I'd like to do it. Right now, I'd like to work 40 hours. Next year, I have a grandchild coming and I would like to cut that time back significantly. I'd like to do 20 hours or maybe 3 days a week. Or maybe I want to work 40 hours most of the time, but I'd like 20 weeks of vacation. That would be great, right? Who wouldn't like that? So all those awesome things you can factor in once you're clear with how you'd like to see that work in your mind. So I hope that this has been helpful and informative. If you have any questions, so I whipped by my question screen, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat box. I don't see any in there right now, but I am going to stop sharing my screen so we can come back together. As I've said before, my email address will come to you whenever I send the recording to you. So you'll have my personal email. Feel free to hit me up with any questions that you have, whether you're thinking about selling internally to someone, or you're thinking about selling to someone outside your agency. Happy to chat with you. I even have a link on there if you want to grab a virtual coffee, given our COVID situation. I would be more than happy to do that with you as well, and look forward to chatting with you. So I also want to announce our next webinar. We are going to dive into your exit strategy. So you may think that I've covered everything in here, but in fact, I have not. I have all kinds of goodies to share with you about your exit strategy and really going another layer deeper into that portion of the discussion to give you more ideas on how it looks and how it feels and all the different things that you can do. So I hope that you will join me. It will be next Wednesday, 2 o'clock. I've got webinars scheduled for every Wednesday this month. And then in July, I'll be taking a little bit of a break while I go on vacation. So thank you so very much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.